Good evening, family. Good evening. Let me get it together. Get it together. There we go. All right. Hold on. Let's get it together. Okay. Good evening, family, and welcome to another Wednesday night in the Word. My name is Pastor Carlos Sr. I'm the lead elder, New Hope St. Petersburg, and so glad to have you join us again as we continue our survey of the New Testament. On last week, we started our new study of the Book of Psalms, or say the Book of Psalms, but the Psalms, and really, just grateful for this season, this opportunity to spend this time together in Psalms. It is such an encouraging book. It is filled with so much wisdom and insight. It is, of course, a part of that division of the Old Testament that we reference as the books of wisdom. And there's a tremendous amount of insight and life wisdom to be found in Psalm. And this week, um, in particular, we have an opportunity to look at a psalm that is designed to express confidence in God when a person is facing, confronted by overwhelming and scary opposition. In Psalm 3, David, the psalm is attributed to David, and David expresses these words: O Lord, how many are my foes? Many are rising against me. Many are saying of my soul, there is no salvation for him in God. But you, O Lord, are a shield about me, my glory and the lifter of my head. I cry aloud to the Lord. I cried aloud to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy hill. I lay down and slept. I woke again, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of many thousands of people who have set themselves against me all around. Arise, O Lord. Save me, O my God, for you strike all my enemies on the cheek. You break the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing be on your people. Um, David here is again expressing confidence in God, and and the circumstances are a little bit odd, right? Like it's not strange to hear David, right? The world famous David, the slayer of Goliath, um, the conqueror of Jerusalem, right? The one who's gone out and fought the Philistines and achieved these amazing victories on the battlefield. The women of Jerusalem wrote songs about all of the great feats of David and his mighty men of God. It's not strange to hear David expressing confidence in God. What makes the context odd is the fact that David is expressing this confidence in God in the face of his own severe moral failure. David is praying this prayer, many historians surmise, not long after, or certainly in a time period post the Bathsheba incident. Now, if you know anything about David, right, then you know the story of David and Bathsheba. David is a married man. He is at the time, during a time when he's normally out at war with his army, he instead decides to hang back, you know, and is there at his home, his castle, his fortress. And while he's walking around on the roof of his domicile, he peeks over into a nearby property and notices a woman, this beautiful woman who is in the state of undress, bathing, and makes a fateful decision um, to interrupt her life and to interject, to place himself in her life, in her life, uninvited. She's minding her own business, not doing anything to anyone, and David invades her life, invites himself into her space, has her brought to his home. She's a married woman. Her husband Uriah is one of David's faithful soldiers. In fact, he's away at war, fighting for the realm, fighting on behalf of David. And David imposes himself on this woman and on her family, has her brought to his castle, um, sleeps with her. We have to assume that it's against her will, gets her pregnant. When her husband, in an effort to try to conceal what he has done, has Uriah come back from the battlefield, attempts to try to have Uriah have relations with his wife in order to cover up the fact that she's carrying David's child. Uriah, being a man of honor and integrity, refuses to be with his wife while his brothers remain out on the battlefield. And so then David sends Uriah back to the field of battle with a note for one of his generals, Joab, and essentially has Uriah set up so that he can be murdered. All of this in an effort to conceal, to cover up this horrible, horrible, horrible thing that David has done to Bathsheba and also to this family. Well, needless to say, when David engages in this onerous behavior, there literally all kinds of Gehenna breaks out, right? First, he is confronted by God. He kind of assumes, for whatever reason, that he has concealed this thing from all of the people that matter, right? The peoples whose opinions are of most importance. But then God taps him on the shoulder by way of the prophet Nathan. And Nathan comes and he tells David a little story about a man who had a little ewe lamb. And even though in that part of the world, you raise up a lamb, you're raising that lamb up to be dinner. This particular gentleman loved his lamb like a pet. Instead of being dinner, his lamb was invited to dinner. And he showered this little lamb with all kinds of affection. Well, this man, according to Nathan's story, had a neighbor who owned vast flocks of sheep. But rather than go and consume one of the sheep of his flock, he instead goes to his neighbor's home, steals his lamb, has the lamb slain and cooked in order to feed his guests. When David hears the prophet Nathan's um, outrageous story about this man's outrageous behavior, he is adamant. Let's, bring this man to me. Let's find him in order that he might be punished for this wicked, wicked thing that he's done. And then for those of you who know the story, then Nathan famously says, "Thou art the man," right? You're the one. You're the one that's guilty of this thing that I've laid before you. You, as the king, literally could have had your pick of spouses. There are any number of women in the realm who would have gladly been your queen, or certainly at least a part of your household. And for you to go and do what you've done to this family is shocking uh, to God. And in this moment right now, you stand condemned before Jehovah. When David hears this, he is pierced with guilt and regret and shame. He repents. Um, God forgives him, but nevertheless, God lets him know the consequences, the repercussions from the choices that you've made are going to be with you for a lifetime. And that's exactly what happens. As a result of those fateful choices that David made, his home life, the quality of his home life suffered for the rest of his life. Um, from his children his children losing respect for him, acting out, undermining his authority. One son, Absalom, uh, actually sought to dethrone and replace his father, even up to including being willing to see his father forcefully removed from the throne. And it is believed that it is during this period where David's life is in a chaotic uproar. He is surrounded by militant enemies who are whispering all kinds of vitriol concerning David. There is a vast number of folks in the kingdom who are done with David. They are through. They've seen enough. They don't need to hear anymore. For them, David has been disqualified. He is not, that might be your king. He's not my king. They were done with him. And it is in that context that many theologians, many scholars believe that David prays this prayer. In the opening parts of the prayer, verses 1 through 3, David engages in something, a literary device that we call poetic parallelism, right? And it is synonymous in nature. In verses 1 through 3, he basically says the same thing over and over again, but each time he says it, he adds a different element so that the statements build on one another. O Lord, how many are my foes? Everywhere I look, there seems to be people who are opposed to me, to my leadership, to my very existence. Many are rising against me. Again, we're still talking about foes, but now we're talking about foes who are actively organizing themselves for his destruction. Many are saying, and so he's identified there are many foes. These foes are now organizing against me, and as a part of that process, they are building up a narrative. Many are saying of my soul, there is no salvation for him in God. Their hope is that God is done with him. Now, there's a subtle admission that's being made by his foes in that statement. That is an acknowledgement that God was dealing with him in the first place, right? So for them, for his enemies, for his foes, it's not a debate as to in terms of was he ever God's man? Was God ever in his life? Was God ever dealing with David? That no, um, he was clearly someone anointed by God for leadership, right from the very beginning. Their hope, though, is that as far as God is concerned, David has disqualified himself forever, and I'm done. That's what they hope. And truth be told, all of us have had some experience with this moment that David has captured for us and now describes for us through by virtue of his praise and his prayers. Situations where either we have been David, done things that were despicable, onerous in the sight of God and community, things that were so unforgivable that we struggled even maybe to forgive ourselves. And there is an instinct, maybe internal, where we become our own enemy and worst critic. And we in our minds think there is no salvation for me in God. Sometimes it is the whisper of the enemy, it is Satan himself that wants to take honest conviction and transform it into deadly condemnation, where he whispers in our ears concerning mistakes that we've made, that you are no longer qualified. You are no longer capable of accessing God's grace, his mercy for relationship. Sometimes it may be the people around you, even people who have been longtime supporters, maybe people who are even related to you, who because of an error or a series of errors, a mistake or a multiplicity of mistakes, now say in their hearts or even maybe with their lips, there's no salvation for him. There's no salvation for her in God. And perchance if you've never say been the victim of this, right, never sat in David's seat, you've never made any sort of mistakes that would otherwise disqualify you, right, then certainly there have been instances where we have seen others judged in the court of public opinion. And the conclusion that folks arrive at as they become judge, jury, and executioner is that certainly God can't do anything more with him. Certainly, he can't do anything more with her. I think about the woman who was caught in the act of adultery and how that crowd of men assumed that because of this horrendous, horrible mistake, this sin that this woman had committed, that she was no longer eligible for grace, for mercy, for kindness. And do you remember the story how they drugged this woman into the presence of Jesus? Of course, absent of the man, right? All in anticipation that Jesus would align with them and stone this woman to death. Or if he opposed them, give them an opportunity to criticize him as a legitimate teacher and a leader worthy of being followed. But it's interesting that sometimes when other people are done with you. God isn't. That there are instances when we are done with people. But just because we're done with them doesn't mean that God is. That all around us, there are tax collectors, there are Mary Magdalens, all around us, there are women at the well, men at the well, who have spent their lives sliding in and out of relationships rather than deciding. Who society, and sometimes we are society, we say in our minds or with our mouths, there's no salvation for her in God. There's no salvation for him in God. And when David hears these reports, right, from enemies, and when somebody puts together that kind of a report for you, even when you're wrong, what else can you do but classify that person as an enemy when in their heart of hearts, their desire is to see your total eradication? No hope for you. No mercy for them. No grace for that side of the table. David brings that and he puts it in front of a God who is filled with grace. A text like this sometimes, a text like this can challenge us to think more deeply about the application of grace and who gets to partake in it. Think about Jonah and God sending Jonah to Nineveh, um, to announce that kingdom's destruction, and Jonah poo-pooing that. No, I'm not. I don't want to go and preach. And we said, well, why is it that Jonah wouldn't? Given how wicked the Ninevites were, right? Their cruelty was famous for that day. In fact, Jonah's people, the Hebrews, had been and would later be victims of the cruelty of that people. They were a hated people for good reason. They were not nice. They were not kind. There was a reason why God had pronounced judgment on the city. So why wouldn't Jonah want to go to that city and pronounce judgment on those wicked folks? Well, we find out later in the story when God confronts him. Jonah later on being confronted by God, he's like, that's why I didn't want to go to Nineveh, because I knew that if I went and I preached and I told the people that that they were about to experience the judgment of Yahweh, I knew that they would repent, and I knew that you would forgive them. And I didn't want that for those folks. I didn't want that for them, for those them people. And I would dare say that we've all at times, if we've not been guilty of this, we've been tempted to want to pick winners and losers. To want to pick winners and losers. But the very thing that makes grace grace is the fact that those who receive it are unworthy of it. It is a gift. If God reserved grace only for those who qualified for it, right? His favor. It's chesed in the Hebrew, right? His unmerited favor. If God gave us favor based on merit, then no one would get favor from him. At what level do we want him to start withholding favor? At what level do we want him to withhold grace? Should he, with, no forgiveness for the liars? Are y'all in my chat? Y'all should be talking in my chat. Where should he begin to withhold grace? Let me see if there's anything going on in the chat. Good evening. Hey, y'all. Hey. Oh, we're in Psalm 3. This is Psalm 3. And where should he withhold the thief? The adulterer? People that harbor hatement, resentment towards other people? Like at what level? Where should God draw the line in terms of who he will and won't extend grace to? Whatever list you start, your name is bound to be on it, right? And so David brings this before God, and his clear confidence is this, right? That he has sought to make whatever his past sin and error, make it right with God. He has repented. He is moving in a new direction. As far as we can tell, he has tried to make amends with those that have been impacted. And so he comes to God. But you, O Lord, but you, O Lord. I was sharing with a friend today at work, and we're just talking about, man, just the power of a perspective, right? In this class that I'm in right now, this psychology class, we were studying last week perspective taking, right? The power of being able to decide what perspective you will embrace about your situation. That there are 100 things that are outside of the realm of your control, 100 things that you can't do anything about. You can't control how how folks are going to show up to work tomorrow, what kind of mood they'll be in, how hard are they going to be willing to work. You can't control the morality of your supervisor, and if they're going to be ethical in their practices. You can't control the traffic. You can't control how, just 100 things that you cannot control. It's out of your control. But the one thing that you can consistently decide is how you view you and how you view your circumstance. What lens you choose to look through when you look at you, when you look at your situation. David, when he first looks at the enemy. I am surrounded by people who hate me, who want to do me harm. If you stay there, if you stay focused on the people that mean your soul harm, um, then it becomes detrimental both to your mental health, your emotional health, and your spiritual development. It cuts you off from all of the things that nourish you and make it possible for you to be resilient in Him. I cannot spend my time, inordinate amounts of time, worried about what other people are thinking and saying and doing. I just can't. I don't. It is unproductive. All it does is fuel fear and insecurity and anxiety. I always find it interesting. We try to talk ourselves out of it, right? I'll even see people post stuff on social media about, about how confident they are. And it's kind of like, but dude, like you're posting on a platform that is all about pulling people in to get validation, right? Because of the general insecurity that is rife throughout the community. And so you say you don't, I don't need validation, but yet here you are posting again because that stuff doesn't work. It doesn't provide any standing, long suffering, durable sense of internal well being, contentment, stability. What helps, man, is taking your eyes off people, not moving, looking from one group of people to a different group of people, right? Looking, turning away from these people who are, pitchfork, carrying the pitchforks and trying to round up a lynch mob, and then looking at another group of people who are going, "Oh, David, you're okay, man. All of that stuff that happened with Bathsheba, that was overblown. Or all the mistakes that you've made, that's nothing." No, you're not needing this group over here that's condemning you to hell, and you don't need this group over here that's whitewashing maybe what's happening. What I need is what's happening here. God, and now I need your help to work out the details. And so, but you, oh Lord, are what? You're a shield about me. It's an interesting thing about shields back in that time. Like, you had all kinds of shields. You had round shields, square shields, concave shields. You had little shields that soldiers would carry by themselves. You have massive shields that were so large. They had, soldier had to have a shield bearer. Like when you remember the story with David fighting Goliath, he had a shield bearer, someone that's there to kind of help hold the shield. David here describes a shield that envelops the envelops him, just surrounds him on every side. God, I look to you because you are my shield. You are my protector. Yeah, whoever digs a pit shall fall in it. That's right. That's right. Back in the day, that's what we say. You dig one ditch, you might as well dig two, right? The one you dig for me might be for you. But David says, God, you are my shield. You are the one that protects me from all of the vitriol. In this instance, even when I've made a mistake and I'm doing the best that I can to recover and to make amends, and then there are people who are associated with what happened who don't want me to have another opportunity, who want to see me fail, who, again, in the words of David, there is no salvation for him or her in God. And David says, but God, you are the final arbiter. You are the final arbiter. You are the decider in chief. Because in truth, my greatness was never the result of my own performance. It was never about me. I remember David when David was trying to convince folks that he stood a chance against Goliath, like he could handle Goliath. You remember what David pointed to in terms of his attributes? What was it that he identified as being the deciding factor that indicated that he could actually defeat this seasoned giant of a man on the battlefield, this diminutive little shepherd boy. Over and over again, he kept talking to the people about the Most High God. I can't fail because God is with me. I can't fail because God won't allow this uncircumcised Philistine to disrespect God and to disrespect his people. It's never been about me. Always been about you. He says, you're my shield and you are my glory. You are my glory, not my past accomplishments, not my present potential, not my future opportunities, but you, God. You, God. You are my glory. And you are the lifter of my head. When David makes this statement about, God being the lifter of his head, typically when in this context, when you think about someone's head being lifted, it is because the head was initially bowed, either because of shame or despair or some combination of the two. And when one's honor has been compromised, where do you go in order that your honor might be restored? When you failed so miserably that on one hand, some people don't even want to touch you. And on the other hand, those who do want to touch you, they want to touch you so they can hurt you. They want to do harm. Where do you go to get your honor restored? To get to in order to have your dignity returned. For David, he says, God, I look to you. You are the lifter of my head. You turn my despair into hope. Where I look around, or maybe even when I look within, I hear people saying, and maybe even I'm saying it a little bit to myself, there is no salvation for him. There's no salvation for her in God. But you, God, that's what they say. But you, God, you are the lifter of my head. You are the one that restores me into right standing, that gives me my honor and my dignity back. Man, there are some people like the world is a strange place, man. It's a strange place. And I say that because we all live within the knowledge that all of us fail. Whether your failure is on Front Street or behind closed doors, we all live with the knowledge that none of us are perfect. But I dare you to mess up and have people watch or have it go viral. Somebody catches you at your worst moment and puts it in, and captures it on film. People will talk about you as if they've never done anything wrong in their lives. And oftentimes, people that are talking about other people are actually have done, if we're doing a sin Olympics, are gold medalists. They they could set records at track meets in how fast they run to foolishness. And listen, this is not to say that God has a standard. When David fell, God confronted him. Um, David repented, but that didn't mean that David didn't have to deal with the consequences of the choices that he made. This is not about that. But this is to say, when a woman comes home from jail and she's done her time, paid her debt to society, but you can't find a job, you can't find housing, because there's no salvation for her in, say, God, say, society, culture. You know, thank God that even when other people may be done with you, God isn't. He is the lifter of my head. And so, because he is the lifter of my head, David says, I cried aloud to the Lord. He raised up his voice. You know, when it's time to get moving and shaking and headed in the right direction, who do you call first? Listen, it's good to, man. It's great. If you've got, if your parents are still alive and they love the Lord and they're, they steeped in the faith. It is great, man, to be able to call your people. If you've got a good pastor, a good relationship with your pastor, if you've got a good friend, a brother or sister, who are in their word, and full of the Holy Spirit, it is wonderful to be able to dial a friend when God gets to moving and shaking in your life, especially on the other side of failure. But, beloved, none of that is a substitute for you crying out to the one who is the shepherd of your soul. David said, I cried aloud to the Lord. And when he cried, he answered me from his holy hill. He talks about God, speaking from this holy hill. It is not, obviously, it's not a literal hill. God doesn't live on a hill. He is painting, therefore, a picture for us. And this hill represents a place of sovereignty and stability. That God for David is where he has always been. Not hard to find, and absolutely 110% still God. And when you begin to seek for him, just know he is where he has always been. He didn't leave you any more than he didn't leave David when David was behaving despicably. But he's there, oftentimes working behind the scenes in an effort to help us come back to ourselves, working through the details of our circumstances, allowing the repercussions of our choices to hit us like waves that awaken us. And he says, he answered me. And when God answered David, um, it had a profound effect on him. I want you to remember now, right? I'm just, surrounded by enemies. Everybody's got his name in their mouths. And their assumption, their hope is that God is done with him. Hey, Mama Osborne, good to see you tonight. That God is done with him. But after God answered him from his holy hill, look at what David says he did next. I lay down and slept. I woke again, for the Lord sustained me. That when God answers, the answer comes in the form of grace, and grace can take, many different shapes, but bottom line is the grace that he provides is a sustaining grace. When God answered David, he answered him with sustenance. He sustained him. And when God sustains you, beloved, it makes sleep possible even in the face of impossible situations. When God is sustaining you, when God is sustaining, you can go ahead and lay down. No matter what they may be, whatever they may be saying, plotting, planning, whatever they're up to, whatever they're doing, when God is the one that is sustaining you, you can be like Jesus, right? Remember when Jesus is on that ship with his disciples and it begins to storm and boat is, rocking and reeling and trying to take on a little bit of water. And they're like, man, where, what's going on, man? We about to go down. Where is Jesus? Do y'all remember where Jesus was? Can somebody put in the chat? Where was Jesus when all of this chaos and turmoil and and so much so that everybody on the ship is panicking? Where is Jesus? Where is he at, y'all? Talk to me in the chat. Where is he at? Let me see if y'all are awake tonight. Okay, y'all are moving too slow. He's asleep. That's right. Thank you, Jess. That's right. He's asleep. He's asleep. Because when God answers you, he answers with sustenance. That's why what Paul says, be anxious for nothing, but in all things by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be made known unto God. And then he goes on to talk about, and then the peace of God that surpass all understanding. You see what I'm saying? That the Paul says essentially that when you find yourself overwhelmed with anxiety, call out to God. He says, and God will answer, right? He will provide grace. And in this particular instance, he says, if what you're dealing with is anxiety, the grace that he'll provide you with is peace. Remember the book of Acts, I believe it's Acts chapter 6, when the apostles are threatened to no longer are threatened about preaching in the name of Jesus. They're threatened by by the Jewish high council and those, the rabbis and the Jewish teachers of that day, right? And they're told, don't, you cannot preach in the name of Jesus. If you do, we are going to harm you, make your life miserable. Um, and what do? They go back, they tell the rest of the community, the beloved community, the church, the ecclesia, the called out ones. They go back, they tell them what has been said. And then what does the church do? They begin to quote back to God the promises that he's made concerning his people from the scriptures. And then they begin to pray about the threats made by their enemies and the internal anxieties that stirs up. But watch this. But then also God's promise of provision. And what does God do in that moment? He pours out his spirit, and then the grace that is given in that spiritual moment is courage, the encouragement that they needed in the face of their fear to continue to be steadfast in their journey. And so I lay down and slept, and I woke again, for the Lord sustained me. And I will not be afraid of many thousands of people who have set themselves against me all around. Listen, when you've had a good night's sleep in the Lord, it impacts how you wake up to face your opponent. We could make an enemy that you really, with the people who allow themselves to be used by the enemy, or the people who allow themselves to be led around by their flesh, by their insecurities, their hurts, their hang-ups, their habits. We can make the argument that that's not really the enemy. Those are puppets. Those are people being used by who is the true enemy of our souls. Principalities and wickedness in high places. But whether you, when you wake up in the morning, whether it is you're envisioning, that enemy, the ultimate mortal enemy of our souls, or those who allow themselves to be proxies for him. When you have a good night's rest in the Lord, then you can wake up with this kind of confidence, right? I will not be afraid. Like the day for him was decided that night. Did you catch that? The day was decided that night. I will not be afraid of many thousands of people. No, no, not no. It doesn't matter how many people jump on this bandwagon, how many people, decide to co-sign. What is it? There's no salvation for him in God. You don't get to decide that. And it doesn't matter how many people you round up to agree with you. See, that's what, a lot of society and culture, you've got to pay attention and beware. Folks think that with the power, that there's real power in agreement, right, of the masses. It's the Tower of Babel all over again. We get enough people, we can build this thing, and then we can become gods ourselves until the real God shows up. Unity with others is beautiful, but it takes on a different kind of stride and impact and relevancy based on the relationship of the group toward God. David said, man, if I don't care how many of you, how many of them that you gather up, if what they're about is not in alignment with his will, his desire, his mind, then it will ultimately fail. It won't go any further than he allows it to go. Even when God was talking, when God would I'm gonna tell you something. When a man and a woman's ways please God, like there's dialogue. Like even when David would mess up and God would correct him, there were times God would like even give David an opportunity to really kind of talk through, well, what is this? What are the repercussions going to look like for you, David? And in the meantime, you got these people behind the scenes. There is no salvation for him in God. Just because you and your friends and your community of friends and your collection and whatever your in group is, just because you decide that God ain't it, just because you decide his word ain't it, you listen, that means nothing. Nothing. The arrogance that exists in our country, that has been bred because of our wealth, our power, our excess. We are fat and full and foolish. And some of us have no idea what's coming, even though he's put it in the book, even though he's made it plain as day, even though you can see it if you've got eyes to see. And so the psalm closes with the action with the words of, the substance of David's prayers, like the words that he actually prays as he's crying out to God. And so what is this prayer? What is this thing that David has been praying, right? I mean, certainly, hopefully you're curious in light of errors that he's made, legitimate mistakes that need to be called out, that deserve and warrant some type of consequence. But David prays this. And for anyone that has been a victim of the mob, for anyone that hesitates to take a strong stand for God because of your fear of the crowd, David's prayer is, "Arise, O Lord. Save me, O my God. For you strike all my enemies on the cheek. You break the teeth of the wicked. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing be on your people." I want to close with this, and just a couple elements of this prayer. And and as you're reading David's prayer, I want to encourage you not just to look at the words that he says, but try to imagine the disposition of the person who says these things. What must their attitude towards God be like? What kind of values are they bringing into the closet? Because God is hearing them. God is hearing this man. And so he says, "Arise, O Lord." Well, what is this idea of arise? Well, for ancient Israel, the presence of God was seen to be, in a sense, in the Ark of the Covenant. And early in the nation's history, when they would go out to battle, they would often take the Ark of the Covenant with them, and right, and so they would say in their poem, in their poetry, and in their battle marches, when the Ark is being lifted, the presence of God is contained right there, and it's, "Arise, O Lord," in the sense of the presence of God arising and going before them. Well, now at this point in David's uh, tenure, it's likely that the ark never left Jerusalem. They didn't take the ark out like that anymore. But the phrase continued, right? They continued to use this phrase to paint this picture of the idea that when they go out to face their opponent, their desire is that God would go up and go before. I don't know about you. I don't know about you. But I'm keenly aware of and sensitive to my failings and my weaknesses. Like, I can't do it. Like, I can't do it. I mean, I've got my own internal challenges and things that God checks me on and moves me around. And then on top of that, you just got all of the stuff that's going on in society and in culture, and I can't do it. I need the Lord to go before me. I need him to go before me. In the same way that, David, might have had in his mind the Ark of the Covenant, but it's the same thing like with Moses, and Moses leading the people out of Egypt and through the wilderness, and God going before them, right? And during the day, he is a pillar or a cloud cover. At night, he's a pillar of fire, right? He's cloud cover in the day, a pillar of fire at night, right? Going before the people, whatever time of day it is, giving them direction, giving them protection. Go before me, lead the way, make it clear. Save me, oh my God. You are the instrument, the source of my security. And when I leave my home with confidence, not because of, my skill as a driver, my perceptiveness as a person, not because of any ingenuity or extra sensory intelligence that I possess, but I leave in the confidence of the Lord. You are my salvation. Save me. Save me from myself. Save me from the corrupting influences of the culture, the tricks, traps, and schemes of the enemy. Save me. Arise, go before me. Save me. And I trust you to do two things as it relates to those who would allow themselves to be used in such a wicked way, right? Just going around trying to destroy other people. Who does that? Who does that? Who has the time to go around hoping and wishing for the failure of others? He says, but for you strike all my enemies on the cheek. To be slapped in the face was a sign of great disrespect. This is a sign of disrespect now. I've heard some men say that the worst thing that another man can do is slap me. I'd rather you just hit me. Sign of disrespect. That God is not, I already know that you're not going to put any respect on anybody that's taking that type of action. How many times have you seen people go out of their way to try and tear other people down, and their actions end up being the source of their own destruction? Listen, man, that train may be slow, but it's never late. You can sit back and watch it. Sometimes, you know, sometimes it can take years. People call it karma. It's not karma. In the Bible, it's called the principle of reaping and sowing. Similar, but it's not the same. It's not the same. Look it up. It's not the same. And look, some seeds, think about a seed, right? Reaping and sowing. Think about that principle, that concept. Not every seed grows at the same rate of speed. You have some seed, man, you stick it in the ground and it feels like it's never going to grow. And then one day you look up and you see a little, like, sometimes people get it confused. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. David says, all of these people out here with my name in their mouths, hoping that God will reject me and condemn me. I already know, God, that the disrespect that they are wishing for me, and you break the teeth of the wicked. So not only, watch this, God chooses to honor who he wants to honor. Like it is what it is. And you could be mad and be salty and like, that's why I don't trust God, believe in God, whatever. You could be mad and be salty about it all you want. Again, who would be qualified if it wasn't all given on the basis of grace? Who would be qualified? You know, um, and so it's interesting that if God is the same one who decides who is honored, he also decides where the dishonor lands. David is confident that the dishonor isn't going to land on the person who has made a mistake, who has erred, but is sincere in their repentance, reflected in their actions and activities post whatever it is that they've done. And so David says, not only will you strike all my enemies on the cheek, but you break the teeth of the wicked. Think about teeth. Some people think that the phrase is maybe more accurately translated like break the teeth of beast. But the idea is that this is teeth are used to chew, but they also a key component in speech, being to clearly articulate your words. And so I look to you, God, because I know that ultimately you are the arbiter of truth. You're the decider. You choose who you honor. You choose who you dishonor. And you also know how to intervene when we say the word the wicked is those who actively reject the ways of God, right? And so in this case, even in terms of how, if David warrants correction, well, what does it look like to correct him in a way that honors God in the process? You're trying to destroy someone who God is not done with. You out of order. And so David says one of the things that, as he's praying, one of the things that allows him to sleep at night, right? And to rest in the answers and the sustenance that God gives is I know that God knows how to disarm those who show up for armed conflict. He breaks teeth. Hard to chew without teeth. Hard to talk about other people without teeth. He knows how to silence critics. He knows how to actively, you know, fight on our behalf against those who would do us harm. Salvation belongs to the Lord. Your blessing be on your people. Ultimately, when we look for salvation, salvation is not awarded to us by the court of public opinion. Thank you, Jess. It's not how many people we can get to agree with what we've done. Social media is causing us to, some of y'all are bugging. You are bugging. And some of y'all are too smart for that. I mean, can't we all, you can recognize the fact people post some of the most insane, inane things in the history of humanity and can still find 8 or 9 people to like posts or to jump on and co-sign what they've said. Even though you can know that what is being said is loony, it is actively ignorant. And yet we will make decisions that involve our integrity, our character, the safety and security of folk that we love and who are a part of our circle based on what? How many likes your post get? How many people you can find in community that will co-sign what you feel like you want to do? These people cannot save you. We can't even save ourselves. Look at this planet, man. Like there's a reason, like in the scriptures, he's got to come back. He left and he's got to come back again. Why? Because we're not gonna fix it. We're not gonna fix it. If you can look around here and see and see that there's a plan of brewing, call me when this is over. Help me to see. He is the one, salvation belongs to the Lord. And his blessing, his favor is on his people. My prayer for you, beloved, as we get ready to close out, my prayer is that, that in these twisted times where it is so difficult, I'll say sometimes it is difficult. All right. I don't want to overgeneralize, right? Sometimes it is difficult um, to know up from down, right from wrong, in from out. That you continue to look to the Lord so that He can provide you with the clarity you need. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your path. Even when you've messed up, even when you've messed up on the level that David messed up, despicable behavior, despicable. Did I say despicable? Despicable behavior. But still not beyond God's reach. That even when others have maybe thrown you away or want you to be thrown away, my prayer is that you would look to Him to whom salvation belongs. If you're not dead, then don't let them bury you. And they can't kill you. Till God says, you got to go. You got to go. You got to go. God, we thank you tonight. We thank you for your word. We thank you for the witness of David in Psalm 3. We are grateful that salvation belongs to you. My prayer is for anyone who's joined us tonight, who may be struggling or wrestling with forgiving someone, or maybe even forgiving themselves, finding forgiveness from their community. And our prayer tonight, God, uh, is that in the same way you ministered to that woman who had been dragged into your presence by all of those men because of this act of adultery. How in that moment you didn't condemn her, but you released her with instructions. Go, go and sin no more. Go and do better, live better. I pray for my friends tonight who may be grieved over past failure. And I pray tonight, God, that they would hear and feel and sense your forgiveness and call to higher purpose, that they would grow up out of their failure. Even now, God, this is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, family. For those of you that have commented in the chat, I appreciate you. Always, comments are always appreciated. Please, if tonight's Bible study has been helpful, like, heart it, love it. That helps it to show up on the algorithm, and maybe there's some other folks who need this word. Maybe they'll come across it. It's not, I have zero desire to be famous or well known. But I do want our great God to be known, and for His word to be heard and to be shared. If this word has been impactful for you, share it on your page, or share it with someone who may be dealing with this exact kind of situation. All right. Hey, Michelle, good to see you. Good to see you. Thank you for coming in. Appreciate that. Amen. Well, listen, we love y'all. The Lord be with you. We'll see you um, prayerfully this weekend.